welcome. Bienvenido a Dr. or Professor Dr. Marco Antonio Joven Romero.
Magandang gabi sa Pilipinas. Magandang umaga dito sa Brazil. Ako sa Brazil.
¿Qué horas son en Brasil ahora, Marco?
A las 10. Laging kasiyahan na dito ako sa UST. Maraming salamat sa lahat, sa profesor, sa estudyante. I mean, it was difficult to leave the university 1 year ago in such a sudden way because of the pandemic, right? But I'm very happy to be in touch with you, not only here in this seminar, but also privately. I mean, it's always a pleasure because UST and all of you are always in my heart.
Yes. Okay. So, Sir Dennis.
Yes.
Simulan na natin. Yes, Professor Dr. Actually, bago pa lang lahat, si Marco ay hindi lang siya lector actually. I think he will be part of the Universidad a Distancia, no? Universidad a Distancia de España. So for those of you who would like to pursue graduate studies in Spain online, just contact Dr. Marco Antonio Joven Romero. No, yung mga ayaw magbiyahe muna, they can study online, pursuing distance education. And actually, maganda yung online university ng Spain. It's cheaper than the university in the Philippines actually.
Yes.
And they have a very nice platform. Okay, para siyang, is it a public university, Marco? Could you please tell it to us before you start your webinar?
Sure. I mean, the public university you are talking about, which is like the equivalent to the Open University, but in Spain, UNED. I mean, it's a very good option if you want to handle and you want to follow online studies, which are very popular in this pandemic. But before, they have a long tradition for that. Quality is excellent, and at the same time, the prices are very, very affordable. I mean, internationally speaking, prices there are affordable. The quality is good. I mean, it depends. All of these things, all of these parameters, they depend a lot on specifically what you want to study. But I've done there my PhD in philosophy, and now I'm finishing my PhD in philology, my second PhD. And in both experiences have been wonderful, as well as masters and so on. So I got my BA in a face-to-face university in Zaragoza, but later on I moved there because I was traveling around, first France, then the Philippines, now Brazil, Vietnam. And it has been always a good option. Probably during the first month it's a bit challenging because the platforms, new platforms, you need to adapt to them. But after 1 month, you can handle them perfectly and you can follow your studies. And with a good advisor, which is always very important, you can be guided and you can realize your goal, which is the final PhD or master.
And they focus more on investigation or research, right?
Yeah, they focus a lot. I mean, in general, all the universities in Spain, all the public universities in Spain, they focus a lot on research. But these kind of online studies, they focus more and more on research. So the professors you can find there are not only teaching, but they are researching, and in many times they are in the top of the research of different parameters or different disciplines.
Yes, muy bien. Bueno, vamos a empezar. So as I have mentioned a while ago, the topic of Dr. Marco Joven Romero will be about lengua aragonesa. No? So it was presented in the video a while ago. And for those of you who would like to participate in the program, the Ministerio de Educación, Becas Auxiliares de Conversación in España. So this will be helpful tip, no, for you, because Dr. Marco will talk about this language. So akala nila Spanish lang yung ginagamit sa buong Spain. So they have a lot of idiomas actually. And one of the popular idiomas is the lengua aragonesa. So it's like the other comunidad, they have Asturiano, they have Catalan, they have, what do you call this? The language used by País Vasco?
Basco or Euskera.
Euskera. And then in Galicia, Gallego, no?
Gallego.
Oo. So, iba-ibang lengguwahe, no? So, they have the official language Spanish, but the other comunidades, they recognize this various languages used in the different comunidades in Spain. Okay, so wag na nating patagalin dahil lahat interested na marinig ang ating panauhing kandangal, Dr. Marco Joven. Dr. Marco Antonio Joven Romero.
Oh, Marco.
Dr. Marco?
Yes. I mean, we've met each other for a long time. You can just call me Marco.
Bueno.
Okay. So I will share my. Empezamos. Let's start. I will share my screen here. Yeah.
Okay, bueno.
Yeah, share screen, entire screen, and shares audio too. Okay. I don't know what's happening. The entire screen. One moment, because. One moment. Share screen. I'm trying to share the screen here, but yeah, sorry. Yeah. I think right now. Okay, so here we have the screen, and here the presentation I have just prepared. So thank you very much for this introduction, my friends, Abigail, Dennis, Professor Abigail, Professor Dennis. I will talk today about Aragonese language, which might be thought a strange topic for Filipino people, but actually I would say it is not. If we think in the context of linguistic diversity and endangered languages, we find that the Philippines is a country, as all of you know, with a lot of languages, more than 180 languages spoken in the more than 7,000 islands. And the characteristics, the social, not the linguistic, but the social characteristics of these languages, many times they are very similar to the social characteristics the Aragonese language has. I mean, all of or most of the endangered languages all over the world, they present similar challenges, similar descriptions, similar attitudes of speakers, of non-speakers. So today I will focus on one of my languages, Aragonese language, but you can extract all of this knowledge to the different languages spoken in the Philippines, and I'm sure many of you or most of you do not only speak English and Tagalog, but also other languages like Ilocano or Waray or Visaya, or I don't know if we are lucky enough to have some Chabacano speakers too, Spanish Creole language. Anyway, so this might sound strange, but actually it is not at all. Let's go, as Ma'am Abigail told us, about the languages of Spain. I mean, in Spain, we do not only speak Spanish, we speak also other languages. Some of them, they have an official status, so, and in their territories. That's the case of obviously Spanish for the whole country, but also Catalan and Valencia, which is the orange one. It is Catalan, also called Valencian here in the south in Comunidad Valenciana. It is also spoken in a part of the south of France, in the small country of Andorra, and also in a village or city in Italy called Alghero. We also have as an official language the Euskera or Basque here, the red one, which is spoken here, but also in part of the France, here in the south of France, southwest of France, in what we call the País Vasco Francés, French Basque country. And we have the Galician here, official in Galicia, this region or Comunidad Autónoma, as we call the regions in Spain, and also in some other places here, Asturias, León, so on. And many people know about these other three languages. Many people know about Catalan. Shakira has a song in Catalan, for instance, about Basque, which is very, very interesting for linguistics, as it is not a Roman language, it is different than Galician. But very few people, even in Spain, know that there is another official language, officially recognized with a special status, which is the Occitan here in Aran's Valley, what we call the Aragonese Occitan, spoken here in this small valley in the north of Spain or in the frontier with France, and also in a vast territory of France, in the south of France, and even in Italy too. So these are the official languages, but they are not the only languages spoken in Spain. We also have the Aragonese, I'm going to talk about. We also have the Asturian or Leonese here, the purple one, which is likely to be official in a few months here in Asturias. We also have Fala here, a language related to Portuguese and to Galician with same roots, but different nowadays and really, really interesting here. Moroccan Arabic can be considered a Spanish language because it was born in the north of Africa here in Morocco, but also at the same time in the Spanish city of Ceuta here. It grew up there. It has had generational transmission, and nowadays is spoken not only because of the original people there, but also because of the high migration coming from Morocco. And something similar happened here in a Spanish village in Africa here called Melilla, with the Berber community who settled there a long time ago and who has transmitted their language, their Berber language, the Tamasek Berber, generation after generation until today. There are few speakers, but they still are. And we also have what we call the para-Romani languages, language associated with Gypsy peoples. Not only one, Caló, which is the main one, the Spanish Caló. This is, I would say, this is like the Chabacano made up by Gypsy people coming with another language. Romani, something similar. People with one language travel to a place with another language, and then a pidgin or a mixed language is developed. What happened with Chabacano in Zamboanga with Chabacano Visaya, or in Ternate with Chabacano and Tagalog. Sorry, in Ternate that's not exactly the case, it's much more difficult, but in Cavite, Chabacano, it's the mixture in some way of Spanish and Tagalog. Something similar happened with Gypsy peoples, but Gypsy people, they do not settle specifically in places of Spain, in any place. We don't say here it's a Gypsy area or region, no, because they form their own districts and neighborhoods all over the cities of Spain. So it is not territorial language, which is quite a challenge in order to give the linguistic rights to the peoples. And apart from Kalos, which are the mixture between a Romance language and Romani language, we have a Rominchela here in the Basque country by Gypsy people who settled in the Basque country and mixed the Romani language with the Basque. So in short, we have more than 12 languages in Spain. 5 of them are official, 7 others are not. I forgot about Portuguese, spoken since the very beginning in some places in the borders between Portugal and Spain. Apart from that, we have sign languages, and also we have migrant languages, languages of migrants coming to work and live in Spain, like Tagalog, which is quite popular, or there are a lot of speakers, especially in Barcelona. Actually, the Barcelona Council, since 5 or 6 years ago, they prepare some leaflets in Tagalog. They are interested in Tagalog and other languages, but also in Tagalog. By the way, I am attending to the chat in Facebook too, so if you have any question, you can ask by the Facebook USD departmental webpage, and I will reply. I'm here also watching here what you are saying. Buenos días y saludos a todos. Buenas noches. Yeah, good night, Magandang gabi, everybody. So, Magandang gabi sa lahat. Let's go specifically to the Aragonese language. Here we have a picture of Santo, one of the villages in the Aragonese Pyrenees where the language is spoken. Let's go. What is it? What is the Aragonese language? Okay, according to the dictionary of the Spanish Royal Academy, which is probably the main linguistic authority about the lexicon in the Spanish language, we have two different linguistic definitions for the Aragonese language. The first one says it is said of the Romance dialect, also called Navarro Aragonese. If we go to Romance, we have that it is a language derived from Latin, as Spanish, Catalan, Galician, Italian, French. Here, Aragonese. This is what I'm going to talk about. But we also have another definition, number 5. It is said of the Spanish variety spoken in Aragon. So here we have two different linguistic definitions which refer to different things, but all of them under the name Aragonese. One of them is a Roman language, a language coming from the Latin language. Yeah, that's good. Another one is the Spanish variety spoken in Aragon, broken Spanish of Aragon, a vulgar, rural, and a bad thing. So we have a linguistic entity, and we have I would say, harmful, prejudicial entity. Both of them linguistic, both of them referred with the same name, which is many times problematic because people sometimes have thought, not nowadays, but until 10, 20 years ago, this is broken Spanish, this is a rural language, this is a vulgar language, this is not profitable at all. Let's see what's happened with another definition. I took the English Wikipedia definition, and it says, Aragonese is a Roman language spoken in several dialects by about 20,000 people, and as of 2011, and in the Pyrenees valleys of Aragon. Okay, so here we have a number of speakers, not many, 12,000, and the places where it is spoken, here in red, especially dark red. These pink ones are places where you can find some isolated old speakers, but it is not really a living language you can listen in the streets. Let's see more about the numbers, about figures. We had, until a few years ago, we didn't have any specific statistic about the number of speakers of the Aragonese language. But in 2011, the National Statistics Institute of Spain, they delivered specific questions of the Aragonese languages for the Aragonese population. And we had that 25,556 people spoke at that time Aragonese language. And we have to zoom also 44,439 passive speakers, which is quite a big, it's a nice figure. Our figures before, our estimations were much lower. And interestingly, we have that almost 1/3 of the Spanish speakers, I think 1/3 of the Aragonese speakers are placed not in this area, but in the capital of the region, here in the south, Zaragoza. What does it mean? It means that because of migrations, most of the speakers of Aragonese language, they are not here, but they are in the capitals. They are in Zaragoza and also in Madrid and Barcelona. Migrations are very challenging and important for endangered languages, in this case for the Aragonese language. So, yeah, until here we have that. In short, we have a Roman language coming from the Latin, spoken in the north of Aragon. Yeah, right now, with several thousand people, several thousand speakers. Okay, but what makes it different? The Aragonese language. What makes the Aragonese language different from other Roman languages, from other languages coming from Latin, like Galician, Spanish, Catalan, French, Portuguese, Italian? What does what's the difference between why the difference is between the Aragonese language and these other Roman languages? Well, we need to analyze the influxes. Mainly, we have a Latin base for the language, but we also have influxes from the pre-Roman peoples, the peoples who inhabited the Iberian Peninsula, the peninsula before the Romans arrived in the 3rd century before Christ. We have Basque people here. We have Iberian people here in the Mediterranean coast, and then we have Celtic people in the center and western part of the Iberian Peninsula, and also Turdetanos here, which are very challenging for historians and students of these peoples and scholars doing research on these peoples. So we have these different language peoples, or set of peoples, or families of peoples, because they had their own sub-peoples, right? It was like the distribution. Okay, they shared some similar cultural and linguistic characteristics, but let's say that the cities and the surroundings were independent from each other. It was not like the kind of politics we are having nowadays. And at the same time, these maps here about the pre-Romance peoples, they are very tricky, because this was the approximate distribution once the Romans arrived, but these people inhabited the Iberian Peninsula for hundreds of years, and during these years they conquered each other, they moved, they came back, so on. So here, even in the north, we may have, and we actually have, Celtic words, Celtic presence. We can research that on the place names, So we have Celtic place names here, but here we have no Celtic. Okay, we have no Celtic when the Romans arrived, but before, these peoples were conquering and moving each other. So in short, we have the influence here where the Aragonese language developed around here of these 3 different peoples and of these 3 different languages: Basque, Celtic, and Iberian. Furthermore, in the Middle Age, as everybody know, everybody knows here that the Arabs arrived in the 8th, 9th centuries, and they conquered most of Spain except for the north, most of the peninsula except for the north. And many Arab words were adapted in all the languages here in Spain. All the languages present a lot of Arab vocabulary and other structures. And also, the Aragonese language presented the influence of neighbor languages, of languages surrounding the Aragonese, like Catalan language, Occitan language here in the south of France, Basque, and obviously Spanish too. And in the modern times, we have the influence of foreign elements, especially technicalities and neologism. How do we say television in Aragonese? Of course, televisión, as well as in Spanish, as well as in English, and I would say, and as well as in Tagalog, televisión. No? So we have this kind of modern vocabulary that it's common all over the world, and in most or practically the total of languages all over the world. This is basically what defines the Aragonese: Latin base, pre-Roman substratum, Middle Age adstratum, and then modern times superstratum, technically speaking. Okay, I've talked a lot about the characteristics of the Aragonese language. I think it's time for us to listen to an extract of Aragonese language, to listen to a person speaking Aragonese, a native person speaking Aragonese.
El metebas aquello quan feban el que són les mullers nas capannas que veniban a fer-lo ta las capannas, las mullers, el que son, perquè se quedaban els pastors allí con las huellas. En las campanas iban a llevarles el almuerzo, a hacer el almuerzo, y hacer el queso. Después de hacer todo el queso, pillaban el sieriche, el llevaban a la fuente, el dejaban allí fresco, que se fuese bien fresco de tardes para cuando venís el pastor. Y anda, menudo refresco y era bueno, el alimento, porque se va a tornar todo a cuajar aquello, sí.
So I mean, this old man is talking about how the shepherds made the cheese with the help of their women. So they went with the sheep and with the cattle to the mountains during the morning, and the women went to the cottages and prepared the cheese, and then when the shepherds came back and finished to prepare and got the cheese, and that was the way they had their meals. And he adds that the cheese there, that kind of cheese was delicious. I mean, a very traditional activity. If you speak Spanish, I suppose you haven't understood this because this is not Spanish. This is the Aragonese language. Later on, you can tell me. Okay, so this is the definition, the characteristics of the Aragonese language. And now let's gonna talk a bit about the history of the language, which is also very interesting to understand the history of Spain. So, in the Middle Ages, since 8th century till 14th, 15th century, we have a period of expansion of the Aragonese language and of all the languages in Spain. Why? Because we are in the moment of the Reconquista. The Christians conquered the land of the peninsula to the Moors, to the Arabs. So Galician or Galaico-Portuguese spread to the south and formed Galician in Spain and Portuguese in Portugal. Leonese or Asturian also went to the south, and it is also spoken in some way, or it has a lot of presence even today here more in the south, in Extremadura. Aragonis moved to the south too with the Reconquista, arriving to Valencia and even to some places here in the coast of Murcia, even if we don't see it in the map. And Catalan spread to the south too and to the Mediterranean Sea, and practically it preserves the same territory it has today. Basque did not stand, Basque stayed there for a long time. Practically it hasn't changed. It has reduced a bit, but not so much, but it hasn't, it didn't went up, it didn't increase their territories and the presence during the Middle Ages. Yeah, this map is very interesting to know what happens with the Spanish languages during all this time, not only during the Middle Ages, but even later on until today. So during this period, during the Middle Ages, we have that the Aragonese was the administrative languages in Aragon. The attorneys, they brought in Aragonese. So all the legal documents made by the attorneys were made in Aragonese in order to register proprietors or to state inheritance and so on. And even in the court, where the official language was Latin, the Aragonese was used as a draft language too. And we have a lot of documents of that time in Britain in Aragonese language. So as I said, it spread to the south, even to here, to Murcia, to the coast. And actually, even today, if you go to Murcia, you will say that in their Spanish language, they have many common characteristics to the Aragonese language spoken, especially in the center of Aragon, not to the north, but in the center. So in Aragon, we say the diminutive. We say that in Ico. How do we say little dog? The little dog is not perrito, it's perrico. And in Murcia, they still share these characteristics too. And some places of Almeria around here, yeah, Mediterranean coast here, Eastern Mediterranean coast. And this time we have a lot of documents written in Aragonese. Some of them are the Glosas Emilianenses in the 9th century, the oldest Roman written document in Spain and in the peninsula. We have the Liber Regum in 2094. We have the documents of La Almunia from 12th to 14th century. We have the Crónica de San Juan de la Peña, or Crónica Pinatense Chronicle in the 14th century. Very interesting. We have Juan Fernández de Heredia in the 14th century. he was the head of the Hospitals of Jerusalem order. He was one of the most powerful and influential persons of the century. He was very, very, very powerful. He was a delegate by the Pope, a delegate by different kings from different kingdoms. And at the end of his life, he decided to start an atelier and I would say a study, an institution in order to translate all documents and all books from Greek language and from Latin language into Roman languages. And he was the first in doing so. So many Greek books coming from classic authors like Plutarch, they arrived until today, and we can enjoy them and we can research them thanks to this person who translated, or whose people translated, these old documents, these old classical documents, first into Aragonese language and then into the rest of languages like Castilian and later on English. And very interestingly, we also have Alhamia texts, mainly mainly texts written by Arabs, also by Jews, in their own spelling and graphic solutions, so with different characters. But when a person, a Muslim, or a person who knows how to read Arab, or who knows how to read Hebrew, when he reads it, what he's talking is Aragonese. So different graphic solution, but still written in Aragonese language. And this is very challenging, and even today an object of research, because it's very difficult to find researchers and people specialized in both in Aragonese language and in historical Arab or historical Hebrew language. They are very, very interesting, and there are a lot of anecdotes and so beautiful stories behind these texts. I don't have time to explain why they are so romantic in some way, but if you have the question, or you have the curiosity, just ask me at the end of this talk. I have here some questions in the chat. Hola, escuché que el romaní es una lengua romance. No, Romani is not talking about the Romanian, the language of the Romanian people, which is a Roman language too, spoken in the east of Europe, the eastern, or one of the eastern Roman language. Romani is the language of the Gypsy peoples, and I think it is a Indo-European language coming from India, moving to the east of Europe in the Middle Ages, and finally to Spain and several places in Western Europe, also during the Middle Ages. At the end, I would say. So it is not Romanian, it is Romani, different languages with a very similar name. Romani is a Roman language. No, Romani is not a Roman language. Yeah, I have explained it. It's an Indo-European language that arrived to Europe in the Middle Ages, first in Eastern Europe and then in the west of Europe, in Spain, and a kind of pidgin between Romani and the local languages developed. In Spain, we know them as calós. There is not only one caló influenced by Spanish, but also several calós, the Catalan caló, the Spanish caló, and also the Romintela, which is the mixture between Romani language and Basque language. Okay, I'm very happy to see your questions here. So any question you may have, I'm watching the chat too. So this is basically the Middle Ages in Aragonese language. Yeah, we have a splendor period of expansion of the Aragonese language and many languages in Spain because of the Reconquista, different languages spreading to the south. It's okay. Don't say sorry, Jose. Don't say sorry. I'm very happy you are asking questions here. Okay, let's go to the 15th century. The 15th century is a milestone in the Aragonese language. It explains why, from being a popular, cultural, and legal language, it changed into almost disappearing. What happened in the 15th century? Well, in 1412, we have the Compromiso de Caspe, Compromise of Caspe. What happened? The last king of the Aragon dynasty, Martin I the Human, he died with no offspring. So the representatives of the different territories of the Aragonese crown, they met in a village called Caspe, and they decided to choose a new king. the new king would be Fernando I de Antequera, of the Castilian dynasty Trastamara, with a different language. Contrary to what it is commonly thought, he didn't change the language used in the territories of the Aragonese crown. But later on, his children, Alfonso V, Alfonso V, and John II, and especially John II, in the 50s of the 15th century, he decided to change the language of the legal documents for the notaries, for the lawyers, and for the court. And in a few decades, they changed. The people started speaking Spanish and left away Aragonese. That was reinforced with the Catholic monarchs who got married in 1469. As you all know, Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. So this trend of Spanishing the documents and the language of the Aragonese crown was reinforced with this historical fact. And as a result, in 100 years, by the end of the century, very few written texts are written in the Aragonese language, and in the 16th century, we find no text written in Aragonese language. Aragonese language disappeared from the written script, from the written documents, but it doesn't mean it disappeared at all. One thing is the written documents, and another very different thing is the oral language spoken by the people. What happened between 16th and 18th centuries? Well, the Aragonese language still survived, but it was considered a rural and a vulgar language, sometimes even a bad dialect of Spanish, a broken Spanish, because it mixed a lot with Spanish too. And further on, in 1707, we have the new planta decrees, decretos de nueva planta, something similar to what happened 200 years ago, still is happening. We have the last Habsburg or Austria king, Charles II, dying with no offspring. There were two candidates, el Archiduque Carlos de Habsburgo and Felipe de Bourbon, Philip of Bourbon and Charles de Habsburg. And they started a war that also was influential in the Philippines at that time, a war between both candidates. And some territories helped one candidate to the throne, and other territories helped the other candidate to the Spanish throne. Finally, the winner, the one who got the victory, was Philip V of Bourbon. And the Aragonese territories, they supported the Habsburg, the other possibility, the other person who wanted to get the throne of Spain. As a result, Felipe V decided to implement some new laws to break the traditional laws and the traditional institutions of the territories of the Aragonese crown. Let's say that until that moment, until the 18th century, Spain, politically speaking, was not as it was today. It was like a commonwealth of territories, different territories, Aragon, Navarra, Castilla, having different laws, presenting different currencies, different languages, different tribunals, different governments, same king, the same monarch, always, but different territories, in some way independent. It's very similar to the current Commonwealth, to the English Commonwealth nowadays. They share the same monarch, but they have their own governments and institutions. From that time on, that changed, and Spain became a centralized country. Actually, one of these points of this act, of the Nueva Planta decrees or acts, states that it is forbidden to use any language that was not Spanish. That was another great hit for the Aragonese language. If it was almost in disuse in written documents, from that on, Aragonese language totally disappeared in written documents, and even socially, people prefer to talk Spanish more and more because that supposes more status. If you want to improve your lives, you need to speak the language of the powerful people, let's think in the Philippines. If you want to improve your life, many people think in the Philippines nowadays that they need to use a perfect English, like an English language spoken by an American or an English person. And they, in some places, as you know, they are setting away more and more local languages and even Tagalog. Yeah, so this is a kind of diglossia that can be seen also in the Philippines. Let's see. Basically, Aragonis flourished because of those who ruled at the time when the rulers were changed. Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, when we talk about diglossia, which is the phenomenon of changing one language for another language, we have social aspects, how the society and how the people react, and we have political aspects, how the authorities establish one language or another. Politically speaking, they decided to implement Spanish. Socially speaking, the Aragonese people were also more open to adopt Spanish, but not the Catalan people, who were ruled by the same rules and by the same political facts. So there is also a presence of society, how open they are for the new language, or how proud they are about their own original language. Catalan and Aragon, they share the same political history, but some people, the Aragonese people, were more open to Castilla, and the Catalan people were not. Yeah, I mean, how do they, okay, because writers, how does the Tamaracans transform the Aragonese language? As a literature student, what do you think is the negative impact of having no written documents in Aragonese? Well, actually, if you're a writer and you want to become popular, powerful, you want to be read, I mean, I would say writers wants to be read, right? Want to be read. If you want to be read, you prefer to use Spanish language. Even Catalan writers at that time, in a much more powerful language, they decided, many of them, to change the language and to write in Spanish language. Even Portuguese writers, they also, at that time, many of them, not all of them, but some of them, they changed the language and they adopted Castilian in the 16th century. Yeah, but they spoke Portuguese, sure, and they spoke Catalan. Me, in nowadays, I speak Spanish. I am a Spanish teacher, Spanish professor. I research on Spanish, but I use English more and more. Why? Because I want to be read. Yeah, this is the phenomenon of diglossia, the different aspects, how powerful is a language. Even if you prefer to talk and to speak in another language and to write in another language, sometimes you have to change if you want to be more powerful and to reach more people. Yeah, the Aragonese language is currently spoken, but I said it at the beginning, by around 20,000 people, more or less. And yeah, later on, we are going to watch a clip of some children speaking Aragonese. Okay, I like this. I like you are making so many questions. That means that it has been interesting for you. I'm happy for that. So let's see what happens later on. Well, I said there is no written document at that time between the 16th and the 18th century. Actually, there is one document or a few documents. Palestra Numerosa Austriaca, 1650. It is an award, a literary award made in Huesca, in which we have 3 different authors writing in Aragonese language. Ana Abarca de Bolea, Matías Pradas de Cariñena, Isabel de Rodas. And 11 years ago, Oscar Latas discovered a Christmas song in Aragonese language made by an author called Francisco Solana. The document was held in London. And we have some anonyms. We don't know the authors. But pay attention, we only have 4 writers writing in Aragonese language, small compositions. We have around 10 pages of Aragonese language in 3 centuries. But pay attention, 2 women and 2 men in a time where writing was not standard, when people do not usually write, and among them women were very, they were not fond of written, they were not taught how to write. It was very difficult to find a woman who knows how to write at that time, 17th century. Well, in the Aragonese language, we have 2 women and 2 men writing in Aragonese at that time, in these 3 centuries, and especially Ana Abarca de Bolea, who wrote here in Palestra Numerosa Austriaca, in this book, in this award, but also in other compositions. She's the most prolific writer at that time. All of them, but especially Matias Pradas, they came from the south. They don't come from the north, from the initial map I showed you. They don't come from the mountains. They come from the south of the region, which shows that it was still spoken in a vast territory, although it was not written. Matias Pradas had no relation with the north of the territory. It was from the south. It shows that the Anana Barca de Boles was from Zaragoza, although she lived near Huesca in Casbas. Anyway, the distribution and the biography of these authors also show that the Aragonese language was much more standard and popular, especially in rural areas of the vast territory I showed you before. Okay. And we also have from that time, especially from the 18th century, what we call pastoradas, shepherd tales. Shepherd traditional tales that depict the oral language, the rural language, which was Aragonese. But that was oral literature that wasn't written until the 20th century, basically. Let's see, let's go on with the 19th century. We have the 19th century, things start to change a bit. This is the Aragonese Pyrenees, actually, where the language is spoken nowadays. Obviously not here, because the cows do not speak languages, but in the villages surrounding this picture. So, in the 19th century, one question before we continue with this slide. ¿Cómo pueden los no nativos conocer y comprender la cultura de los nativos aragoneses si solo hay unos pocos documentos? Okay, we are focusing now. I was focusing between 16th and 18th century, but later on, now in the 19th century and 20th century, and nowadays, we are going to realize, we are going to see that there are much more documents. There are much more written texts and other kind of documents which are very interesting to study the language. We have a lot of documents before the 15th century and after the 19th century. We have a desert, we have a gap there, but we still have. Question: Aragonese language is currently spoken by 20,000 people. It is considered alarming? Yeah, it is. It is totally alarming. Aragonese language is an endangered language, is in alarming situation. Right now, are Aragonese literature texts taught in schools? Yeah, they are. They are. I will go on, and we will arrive to the 20th century and to the situation nowadays. But actually, nowadays, they are taught at some schools under some specific conditions, but yeah, things have changed. We are not living in the 18th century anymore for the Aragonese language. I expect so. You mentioned that there are few researchers who specialize in, what do you think are the ways that can allure scholars to study the language more? Well, there are few, but there are actually, and they are being more and more, especially during the last 10 years. It's been an interesting topic. I will explain now in this slide and the next one the history of the contemporary research on Aragonese language, which started with these two people here, Joaquín Costa Morel Fatio, and continue until nowadays. I will explain that now. So we arrived to the 19th century, the 18th. How did the Aragonese? Yeah, I mean, I will explain many of these questions in these slides. And how did? Well, I explained that there were some political reasons, political challenges that changed the rules, that changed the popular language, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, people were open to adopt Spanish language as it was more cosmopolitan and more rural. Let's say, in short, very, very short, that the situation presents some similarities to the English, Tagalog, or English and native languages in the Philippines. People sometimes prefer to talk in English if they want to improve, to get better jobs, to improve their living conditions, because the English is the language, is the cosmopolitan global language and the language of the powerful people. Something similar happened in the Aragonese language at that time. Since the language was very much used before, but it is now rare, do you still think that it? Yeah, well, that's Karandang. I love that question. I will address this later on, but that's very interesting question. Is it useful to speak Aragonese? Well, in some way it is, some way it is not. Actually, my native language, my mother tongue, is Spanish, but I am speaking and writing more and more in English every day in my job everywhere. It is useful, not Aragonese. It is useful Spanish for me. Sometimes it is not, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna forget it. Yeah, I will go on later on with this because this is the key question. Yeah, Kiambao, do you think it has a chance to be spoken by more people? Yeah, it has. Especially, it is not about trying to spread it and to extend it. It is basically trying to preserve it and to allow the people who speak it to still speak it and to transmit it into their future generations. Okay, it is very sad to see fathers and grandparents speaking a language and not transmitting it into their children or grandchildren. This is the sad thing at all. It is not about the new people speaking the language and learning the language. It is about transmitting the language. Okay, let's go on 19th century. So I said that between 16th and 18th century, we had a lot of troubles. The Aragonese almost disappeared in the Britain documents. It was considered a rural and burgal language. Yeah, but we also have in the 19th century the beginning of some interests in the language. There is a linguistic interest. There is an anonymous dictionary written at the beginning of the 19th century. We have the Dictionary of Peralta, 1836, and we have a debate about the language between Joaquín Costa and Morel Fatio, two of the main intellectuals in the European sphere at that time, deciding if what was spoken there was Aragonese or not. Morel Fatio said, well, more than 300 years with no Aragonese documents, that's impossible that the language is still spoken. Joaquín Costa, who was an Aragonese speaker, he was born in the north of the region and he spoke Aragonese. He said, yes, I think my language is Aragonese. So they were debating. The debate started in 1878. And as a result, one of the disciples of Morel Fatio, a man called Jan Josep Saroy-Handy, came to the Pyrenees and started studying the language. Since 1896 until his death, he passed away in 1932. He went there with a small donkey, covering the valleys, covering the villages, interviewing people, registering what they talk, and asking them in a very romantic history. I mean, the history, the biography of this man is amazing. And he was the first person to teach Aragonese language at university in Paris. Not only we have the linguistic interest, we have historical interest. Montesquieu, everybody knows about Montesquieu, one of the intellectual leaders of the Illustration movement, the Enlightenment movement, like Ilustración in Spanish. He wrote about the Aragonese, he mentioned the Aragonese language in 1718, in his pension letters 106. We also have some literary interest. Vida de Pedro Saputo of Braulio Foz. We have 2 chapters of this book, which was very popular until 60, 70 years ago, written in Aragonese language. It was the last, it is said it was the last romance following the Quixote style. We have an inedit work. Many people we want to read right now, but the owner does not, I think they don't want to publish it, but it was published, it was written in 1847, Concello da Aldea, de Bernardo La Rosa. This is very interesting, but still inedit, unluckily. We have one author in Ribagorzano, in one of the dialects of the Aragonese language, Bernabé Romeo, writing in Aragonese language in 1888. So in the 19th century, after 300 years of disappearance, we have some kind of renaissance for the Aragonese language. It appears again in research, but also historically speaking, but also the first literature in the language. And then, if we go to the 19th century, this goes on. We have linguistic interest. The linguistic interest about the language after the studies I already mentioned of Jan Josep Saroy-Handy started not in Spain, but in Europe. And many researchers, they came here. They came to the Pyrenees, to the Aragonese Pyrenees to study the language. Among them, Alwyn Kuhn, William L. Koch, Rudolf Wilms, Fritz Kruger, Gerald Rolfs, Gunther Heinz, who died a few years ago. What do they have in common? Most of them, all of them, are foreigners, because we are in a time, the first half of the 20th century, in which anthropology and linguistics are interesting topics for European researchers, but not really for Spanish researchers at that time. Most of the people who went to the Pyrenees to study the language were European. We also have some local researchers like Benito Col, Pardo Aso, or even the Nobel Prize Santiago Ramón y Cajal. He mentioned the Aragonese and he struck some basic ideas and vocabulary and grammar structures in his biography, because when he was very young, he went to live to Ayerbe for several years, and in Ayerbe he learned and he spoke Aragonese language. So in some way we can also say that we have a Nobel Prize speaking Aragonese language. This is getting better for the Aragonese language, and in 1915, the government of the province of Zaragoza decided to settle the Estudio de Filología de Aragón. It is an academia. It is an institution that regulates and normalizes the language and gives the language a philological status. This is very important for the language. But it disappeared in 1941. That was a shame. Why? I will explain it later in the next slide. But pay attention, that was so important that even María Moliner, the author of one of the most important dictionaries of the Spanish language, worked there for a few years. So we can say that María Moliner trained and studied linguistics, first Aragonese linguistics, and then, because of the knowledge he got studying Aragonese, Spanish. And later on, she became one of the main Spanish students or scholars or researchers on Spanish language in the history of the Spanish language. But she trained on Aragonese language before. The literary interest still grows up. So we have many authors writing in Aragonese language. Some of them are Leonardo Escalona, Cleto Torrodellas. Okay, I would say you don't know about these names, but I want to focus that there are much more writers in Aragonese language at the beginning of the 20th century. The Aragonese language is getting a status, a linguistic status. Yeah. But at that time, and this is important in order to answer some of the questions you are making here, at that time that the Aragonese language presence is growing up, we have new challenges. Radio appears and spreads all over the territories, but the main broadcasters, all the broadcasters, they decide to use Spanish language. They don't use Aragonese language. And that was very bad for many people who had no straight connection with the outside world and who only spoke Aragonese, because now they have a Spanish influence. Then we have the universal teaching system that was promoted especially by Elizabeth II, not only in the Philippines, but also in Spain. Okay, it gains force, it empowers, and it arrives to many villages that it hadn't arrived before. And as a result, many children in the small villages in remote areas of the mountains who still spoke Aragonese, they start speaking Spanish more and more. The language shift, even in remote villages and remote areas, started universal teaching, especially during the Second Republic. We have rural exodus. Okay, the villages and the rural areas, they have limitations, they present limitations. So many people decided at that time and even today to move to the big cities in order to work, in order to study, in order to have a better life, in order to prosper. And when they move to the big cities, they change the language. The language of the cities obviously is not an endangered language, it's not a minority language, it's English. It's like people moving from villages in the Philippines to Manila. They need to learn Tagalog and English, right? They speak Tagalog and English. They stop using other languages like Waray. Something similar happened here in the Aragonese language at that time, and it is still happening nowadays. And we have also the beginning of tourism. People at that time, high-class people going to the mountains to enjoy the summer, the winter. And one of the facts that marked the tourism in the area of the Aragonese language was one of the first trains settled in Spain, Canfranero, a train that connected to Canfran a valley in the Aragonese Pyrenees, the first valley who lost the Aragonese language. Why? Precisely, one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, was the train that allowed many people from other places, especially from the cities, to arrive there to enjoy the summer and to speak a new language, Spanish, and the locals adapted to it. Something similar happened today, globally speaking, with English. We move from one place to another, okay, all over the world, just for tourism or for a few weeks, for a short stage. What's the language we use? Everywhere in the world, or almost everywhere, English. So something here in small scale happened. What's the language? People learn and use with the new people coming from the cities to enjoy the mountains. Obviously, Spanish. Okay, so I will answer some questions around here. Okay. Oh, many questions. Okay. Let's see. Tengo una pregunta. Reference efforts by the government. Yeah, there are recent efforts. I will talk about this later. Gaviola, yeah, thank you for the question. I will focus on the current situations in a few slides. Are there any efforts by the European Union? Yeah, there are. I mean, there is a document, the European Chart for the Endangered and Regional Languages. There are some period reports in which they explain the situation, and they also propose and enforce the local governments to adopt some measures. So in some way, there is also a European legal initiative for that. I will explain it later. ¿Cómo es importante? ¿Crees que estudiamos? Well, I will explain it later. I mean, we are living in a diglossic process. We need to understand what is diglossia. Diglossia is the change of one language for another, the different aspects I'm explaining that affect the local languages. But in short, diglossia is affecting not only Aragonese language, also Spanish. I mean, I'm Spanish native speaker, but I'm using English more and more for my job, for my future. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to transmit my Spanish language into my children. That's very sad. The sad thing here is that people are letting away their languages, and they are using only one, and the one they use is the one they find more useful. So it is useful. Yeah, probably Spanish is not useful anymore, and only English in a few decades. Actually, today, obviously, Spanish is useful. What's going to happen in 100 years? I don't know. Is Aragonese useful? Probably not. Probably you should use your time in learning English and speaking English. Yes, that's totally true. But that doesn't mean that you don't transmit it into the children. I mean, we need to preserve diversity because it's part of our identity. Let's see. Something wrong. ¿Crees que puede hacer la gente? Okay, I will explain it later about what's happening nowadays. ¿Cómo crees que la lengua aragonesa utilizada en el pasado? Yeah, that's what I'm explaining now. Características, yeah, I explained that at the beginning. How did Moroccan Arabic arrive to Spain? Yeah, well, I mean, most of the Moroccan Arabic speakers are migrants, yeah, but there is a community in the Spanish city of Ceuta in the north of Spain, a very small city there in the north of Africa, sorry, that where the Moroccan Arabic generated, and then it was transmitted generation by generation until today. Yeah, although it also has a very influx of migrants coming from Morocco to that city too. But in some way, we can say that in a small part, in a specific part of the Spanish territory, Moroccan Arabic is also a proper language, an original language, and in that way, that is Spain. It's a language of Spain too. Okay. There are efforts, yeah, we'll explain. Would you agree that the Aragonese language is the most Spanish? That's hermosa. I like that question. Yeah, that's something very interesting. Aragonese and Fala in Extremadura are the only two languages of Spain that are only spoken in Spain. All the rest of languages, Catalan is also spoken in France, Andorra, and Italy. Basque is spoken in France. Galician and Portuguese, there is a philological debate, as well as Fala in Extremadura. Moroccan Arabic is spoken obviously in Morocco and other countries. Yeah, the only language, or I would say Asturian is also spoken in Portugal, in Miranda. the language, the only language that is of Spain that is spoken only territorially speaking only in Spain, it's Aragonese. That's something interesting, yeah. Jan Cesar Ijanti went and interviewed with locals. Does he already have some prior? No, I mean, he arrived there knowing nothing about Aragonese, but then he learned Aragonese, speaking with the locals. He did a very wonderful research, specifically accurate research, that it is still used nowadays, and that it is still nowadays one of the main sources, or the main source, to study Aragonese, because he was so accurate. The methodology he applied was amazing. I mean, his work is amazing, but specifically his methodology. Yeah, but he learned Aragonese, and actually he taught Aragonese at La Grande École de Paris, at a university, one of the main universities of France. I thought it was in the 20s of the 20th century. Do you think that suddenly implementing Aragonese into a school curriculum will be enough? No, I think it's not enough only school. We need to do more things, but school is a milestone. I mean, it's necessary, but not sufficient. I will explain later on. Do you know of any Aragonese literature that you can introduce? Yeah, I will explain it later. I will give you later some literature to introduce you on Aragonese language. Is there a possibility that the majority of the population of Spain will learn? No, there is no possibility that the majority of Spain, or the Spanish population, will learn Aragonese language. We are not asking to spread the language. We are not, at least me, I'm not asking to spread the language. I am asking to preserve the language. I am asking to favor or to help or to support people who speak the language to continue using it and to transmit it into the future generations. That's the goal, not to, and then if voluntarily anyone else wants to learn it, go on. Sure, we have to give the chance for people who want to learn Aragonese so that they can learn Aragonese as well as they can learn English or any other language. But it's not about making everybody to speak Aragonese. It is about preserving the language and to preserve it among the current speakers. Okay. Okay, let's go on with the next slide. So what happened after 1941, the date in which in which the Estudio de Filología de Aragón disappeared, until 1975. So again, we have politics, damaging, politics being harmful for the Aragonese language. So we have Franco's dictatorship between 39 and 75. There is a strict prohibition of the use of any language that was not Spanish language, at least until the 70s. At the end of the Franco's era, it was a bit more open, but not for the Aragonese language. So there was a strict prohibition in the use of other languages that were not Spanish. And at the same time, there was social mockery. People who do not speak Spanish because they didn't know how to speak Spanish, they were subject of mockery. Even until 10 or 15 years ago, that happened. And, you know, so many humorists and comedians, they decided to make jokes or mocks on the language. We have some clear examples from Paco Martínez Soria, María Nicole Corto, even recently Miguel Nadal, etc. So we have a negative connotation for the language. But we still have philological studies, but always or most of the times under a pro-Spanish perspective. Navarro, Tomas, Manuel Alvar. So what they said basically, at least at the very beginning, okay, we have a linguistic issue here, a linguistic material, a linguistic part into study, but it is related to Spanish. We will never give it a status of a language, even if it was given before, even if it was a language before, yeah? So it was considered, well, a strange variation of Spanish. But if you say to the raven, you call it in Spanish urraca, and then in Aragonese you call it picaraza, and in Latin is pica pica. How picaraza comes from urraca and not from pica pica? That's impossible, yeah. If we have, let me find fogar, no. Instead of hogar, house, home, in Spanish with F at the beginning, the beginning F, that's Latin, that's not Spanish. So how can it derive from Spanish? No, I mean, it was basically, yeah, it was a philological study, they were philological studies. They are interesting as subjects to study even nowadays, but they were very, very politicized. I mean, they were not so accurate on many aspects, especially on linguistic filiation. And again, I commented, I said that at the very beginning of the 20th century, we had some strong challenges. And these challenges, apart from the political challenges of the Franco's dictatorship, these other social challenges are becoming deeper and deeper, bigger and bigger. So it is not only about radio, it is also about television. Now we have television, even in the small villages. And television is spread only in Spanish language, not in Aragonese language. And Aragonese speakers, they are subject to a new influx in Spanish language. So it's easy for them to change the language. The universal teaching system also spread to more and more small villages. So almost every children at that time, they went to school. Obviously, in the school, school was only regulated under the Spanish perspective, no Aragonese at all. The rural exodus went on more and more, farther and farther. Even nowadays, it's happening. People are living there in small villages. They go to the big cities, to Zaragoza, and even Madrid and Barcelona, because they want to improve their lives. They want to get higher studies, and they want to get better jobs. And tourism is just not an issue of high-class people. Also middle-class people, and sometimes recently low-class people, they can go to spend some days to the mountains just to enjoy the forest there, or to do some climbing, so on, climbing, hiking, so on. New roads are built. It is not about the train. It is also about new roads, many, even nowadays. So the connection with the big cities and with the Spanish language is deeper and deeper. And all of this is challenging for the Aragonese language, which is in a weak position. Okay, let's see. I will ask the questions here. I'm going fast because I want to say many things. To talk and to explain a language in just 1 hour, 2 hours is so difficult. But let's see. Why is it still okay? Why? I will explain the reasons to later. Many questions are asking about why to preserve it. I will focus this later on, but let's say that the diversity is part of our identity, and it's useful to preserve it. People who already speak larger languages all over the world, they got the idea. People who do not speak, who speak only the national language, they find it more challenging, more difficult to assume the idea. Okay, but as a linguist, I always say people. I blame people, or I feel a bit. I feel sorry for people who find problems in languages. For me, languages are so beautiful, and at the same time so interesting, that I cannot see any trouble in language. So I like to learn many languages, and probably most of the times it's because of the fear of the unknown. And when you see two people speaking each other in a language you don't know, you sometimes may think, oh, are they talking about me? What are they talking about? And you feel fear about them. I think it's at the very end a problem of fear, and we shouldn't be fear of diversity. Yes, we should enjoy diversity. Is Sephardic Spanish still spoken in Spain? Well, probably there are some migrants. I don't know. I would say there are some migrants, but as a live language, as a curricular language, as a social language, it is not spoken anymore. It's mainly spoken in Turkey and Israel. Thessalonica, until the Second World War, was the capital of Sephardic language. But when the Nazis arrived in Thessalonica, the population disappeared of Sephardic speakers. Of Ladino speakers or Spanish Sephardic speakers. They disappeared. Most of them nowadays are found in Turkey and in Israel. I would say also in Argentina. In Spain, probably you may find some individuals, some specific people speaking the language, but not many. Yeah, Spanish, Castellano, they refer to the same language. Some people prefer to use Spanish or some people prefer to use the name Castellano, but they refer to the same language. I mean, probably the reasons behind one name or the other are more ideological or political than really linguistic. Are there any consequences for not speaking Spanish? Well, I would say a language with more than 400 million people. Are there consequences for not speaking it? I would say no. I would say the real dangerous consequences of not speaking a language with only a few thousand people, speakers. Are there any similarities or differences with French Aragonese language? Yes, they are. They are, because sometimes we say that the Aragonese belongs to the Gallo-Romania, a family of Roman languages that share common characteristics: Catalan, Aragonese, French. I would say that the main influence coming from the north of the border here, coming from France, is not exactly from French language, but from another language spoken in the south of France, also endangered language called Occitan. So we have French influence, but mainly Occitan influence. Yeah, Mendoza, that's exactly what I would like. I mean, what I want to focus. I am talking about the case of an endangered language here, the Aragonese language, a language I speak, an endangered language in Spain. But I would like you, or I would be very happy if you apply this knowledge to the situation of the endangered languages in the Philippines, which are more than 180. That would be very interesting. As you can see, we have some common troubles and some common characteristics of the of different endangered language, similar situation. Let's see. Since the Iberian Peninsula was controlled, the Arabic, sure, Arabic influenced the Aragonese language as well as any language spoken in Spanish. Roman language like Galician, Asturian, Aragonese, Spanish, Catalan, and also the Basque. We might find, and we actually find, lexicon, and not only lexicon, also some prepositions or grammar structures of the Arabic language in the current Spanish languages. Some examples, for example, acequia. Later on, I will write it, but acequia, arroz. They are aljamia. They are basic words written used in the Aragonese language nowadays, written that comes from the Arab language, and they are still in use in the Aragonese. We also have toponyms. We have place names. Like in this area in Alto Alcanadre valleys, we have a lot of Mascún, Los Zamora, Almunia. We have a lot of place names with that came from the Arabic. Yeah, it influenced. Probably less than Spanish. Spanish was likely to be more influenced by Arabic language than Aragonese, but still we appreciate the influence of the Arabic population and the Arabic language in the Aragonese language, sure, as well as any other language in the country, in Spain. Zaragoza is Spanish or Castilian, and Zaragoza, technically speaking, is the English way of writing the city. Hay universidades que ofrezcan the Universidad de Zaragoza, precisely, they offer a master a diploma in Aragonese philology, in Aragonese language, and also a special mention for in the teaching in BA in teaching, in their studies about teachers. They offer a specialization in the Aragonese language. What is the most significant contribution? Well, we have many lexical of vocabulary of Aragonese language into Spanish. For instance, faja, which is the corset. Faja, that's a very common word in Spanish. Its origins are Aragonese origins. For instance, that's one example. We were talking about with a friend about the word porche. Porche, I mean, just the court of a house, also seems to be Aragonese or Catalan. El idioma, well, I will put an extract of Aragonese language later on. I have already put one. Later on, I will put another one. Why the Castilian or Spanish became the Spanish language by default? Well, that was a series of political reasons. I have mentioned 3 different political reasons. Yeah, the Compromiso de Caspe in the 15th century, Decretos de Nueva Planta in the 18th century, and later on the Franco's dictatorship in the 20th century. It's similar. Well, they are different Roman Catalan to Aragonese. Are they similar? They are different Roman languages, but at the same time, they belong to the same family of Gallo-Romania. They are close, and in the development of the different Roman languages, they share characteristics. They are different languages, but they share some of characteristics. Patois, dialect of Occitan. Okay, patois is a negative word, I mean a pejorative word used by French linguistics until the beginning of the 20th century for any other language spoken in France that was not French. So Occitan was patois, and Breton was patois. Yeah, all the languages spoken in France that were not French, they were called patois, and that was the language of the Dutch. I mean, that was a pejorative, negative term. In France, we also use patois here for this variety, and that's because of the influence of the French terminology. What are some other cousins of the Spanish language, and what is the most interesting? Yeah, I show you at the beginning Asturians, Galicia, so on. Let's see what's happening now on native speakers. Native speakers, I mean, what's happening after 1975? After 1975, I like to explain that there are 2 different communities of speakers. On the one hand, native speakers, the people living in the villages and preserving the language generation after generation. And then a new community of speakers. A community of speakers who have learned the language, especially in the big cities, because of different reasons, many times ideological reasons. So we have 2 different communities of speakers with very different underground characteristics. Let's see that. Okay, native speakers. The areas where the Aragonis is spoken are so weak that they have fragmented into islands. So you go to the Aragonese valleys, to the north of Aragon, you may listen Aragonese language in the street, especially in these areas in dark red. Yeah. So it is not the area here I put you at the very beginning. I showed you at the very beginning. It's reduced into islands. In the rest of the territory, you might find all speakers in some specific houses, but the language is not a common language anymore. It is only common in the streets in these dark red areas. We have shame in use. During this time, speakers didn't want to share and to use the language to foreigners because they still thought that was rural language that was not useful, and they were subject of mockery so many times that they decided not to use it anymore, only with the family and with some close friends, but not for the rest of the people. Most of the speakers were elderly speakers. Young people only spoke Spanish at all. I know about the specific case of a person whose grandmother spoke only Aragonese. The grandmother spoke Aragonese and Spanish. The mother spoke only Spanish but understood Aragonese, and she, who was my age, did not speak Aragonese. Only in 4 generations, the language was totally lost. We have local use. At the very beginning, the language was used in all the territory. So people moving from one valley to another, they decided to use the language, the Aragonese language, to communicate. But then they decided to use Spanish to communicate to the other people, and only Aragonese inside the valley or the area. But then not only inside the valley or the area, but inside the very own village. And even when he moved or she moved to another village, they decided to use Spanish. And then even inside the very village, they decided to use only Spanish. And they only used Aragonese for the neighbors, for the same street. And finally, they decided to use Aragonese only for the family and close friends, and not for the rest of the people. So we also have a different level of use, yeah, broader, less and less territorially speaking. We have a lack of linguistic consciousness. I mean, many people decided to to use, they thought, well, I don't know what is this other language, but I don't know if it is a language. What is this? I don't know. Probably a broken Spanish when it is not. And we have also a vindication based on old-fashioned forms. So what's happened here? Native speakers sometimes decided to continue and to cultivate their language. Some native speakers were very proud of the Aragonese language, and they wanted to work and they wanted to do things on the Aragonese language. But what happened is that the way they did was not attractive, was not popular, was not mediatic. So they decided to write tales of shepherds, of love, tales that were not appealing even for their own grandchildren. Their own grandchildren were more focused on Harry Potter or nowadays on Netflix TV series than on the tales of the grandma, the tales of the grandpa, which are boring. Yeah. So basically we have a problem that native speakers are old, they are ashamed, they don't communicate, and when they try, they use very old-fashioned forms that are not appealing anymore nowadays. And among the new speakers, the people who learn the language and that are fighting for them, we also have some other troubles and problems. First of all, well, this movement started in the 70s with these three people, Francho Nagore, Ángel Conte, Jesus Vázquez. Okay, they realized that there was a language there, that they had to preserve the language, they had to do something, and the first cultural associations and the first studies and the first movements appeared in the 70s, coincident with the death of Franco and the end of the dictatorship, of the Spanish dictatorship. But this movement many times has been mixed with political ideas. I mean, so I defend Aragonese nationalism and I speak Aragonese language. Well, let's stop this. One thing is the language, one thing is your ideology. And you may have any ideology you want, and you should still, or you have the right to speak the language. It's not about politics, it's about the languages. There has been a lot of political corruption between languages and politics, and that has been harmful, because the rest of the people who do not share nationalist, regionalist, or any other kind of ideologies, they see the language as a tool of these ideologies they don't share. When it is not a tool, a language must not be a tool of any ideology. It must be heritage to be preserved, and the most important thing, heritage to be appreciated by everyone, no matter if you are a speaker or not of the language. Let's go on. There has been lack of administrative and institutional support. Yeah, the authorities, the institutions between 1975 and 2009, they decided to I mean, their performances and their support for the language has been very reduced during this time. Just the edition of some very little books, and that's all, but not real powerful measures. And at that time, and during that time, the language was losing speakers, and it was disappearing of the panorama. We had very little presence in media, no radio, no TV in Aragonese language, sometimes some small underground broadcasters for the radio specifically, and a very few experiences on television, but just very minorized or underground broadcasters that arrived to almost nobody, just a few hundred people. So that was not effective for their speakers, not for the native speakers, and even for the new speakers. We also have another reality, is the Catalan of Aragon, a language spoken in the eastern part of the region. So what's happening here? Catalan is spoken mainly in Catalonia, another region, and because of different political reasons and historical reasons, there have been confrontations between Catalans and Aragonese. So when the Catalan is spoken in Aragon, it is something badly seen by some Aragonese population. So some Aragonese population, they do not want to admit that Catalan is spoken in Aragon. They don't want to promote the Catalan in the places where it is spoken. And at the same time, they don't want to promote any language at all that it is not Spanish. So the reality of the Catalan of Aragon also was damaged. The reality of the Aragonese language. Obviously, that was not the fault of the Catalan language of Aragon, and that was not the fault of the Catalan speakers alone. yes, it was the fault of the people who have prejudices on the endangered language, you know. But this trilingual reality of the region also affected the Aragonese language. And then we have inner troubles in this new speakers community. You know, people appear, they want to fight for the language, they learn the language, they study the language, but then they have the very different ideas on how to normalize the language, on how to proceed. And different ideas and different ways and different perspectives, they lead to conflict. And there has been a lot of conflicts in these communities of new speakers during these years and even today. And the two more important aspects in the new speakers community is that there is a lack of social knowledge and conscience. So the problem is not about native speakers, new speakers. The main problem is about the people who are not speakers of Aragonese language, the people who are not speakers of endangered languages, not appreciating them, even considering them something useless, even mocking people who speak them, because these people do not speak them. Then if they do not speak them, that's not useful, no? This idea of what I don't speak is not useful. That's a very, very, very harmful idea we have to set off. And there is also another problem. I have talked about two different communities of speakers. A new speakers community on the one hand, and a native speakers on the other hand. And until recently, the communication between these two communities has been very weak or even inexistent. Nowadays, it's getting bigger. There is an interesting fact, is the fact that speakers of native speakers coming from the north of Aragon, they travel to the city, they work in the city, they study in the city, and many of them are getting in touch with the new speakers community, so they are mixing and they are understanding each other more and more, although the lack of communication between these two different realities is still present. Well, so many things to say. I'm rushing a bit. Yeah, we arrive now to the situation of the language nowadays. But first of all, I want to answer some of the questions stated here. Let's see. Well, Bitawak, he's asking us, in what ways do the native speakers of the Aragonese language reach to the Spanish government to prioritize the preservation of this language? Yeah, good question. Recently, about 1 or 2 months ago, maybe more because time goes by very fast, the Spanish Congress approved a resolution in order to support and enforce the officiality of the Aragonese language and the Catalan language of Aragon. Yeah, so the central Spanish institutions, specifically the Congress, have approved a very important statement. They also approved the European Charter of the Endangered and Minority Language and Regional Languages, which supports the Aragonese language. What are the major? It's Patois, a dialect of Occitan. Patois is just a negative terminology for any language in France that is not French. Okay, and it's less and less used, this terminology. Okay, so Patois in the Philippines would be any language that is not Tagalog. That's basically. And Aragonese language is in danger. What is important? I have already answered that. Español y aragonés utilizan el mismo alfabeto. Yes, they use basically the same Roman alphabet, yeah, as most, or I would say all of them. No, not really, because Romanian in Transnistria, they use Cyrillic alphabet. But as almost any Roman language, any language coming from the Latin, we use Roman alphabet, Latin alphabet, Latin spelling. Question, because the Spanish Centrales, does internal linguistic... Yeah, well, I explained that linguistic centralist policies have damaged the Aragonese language in different stages of their history, first in the 15th century, then in the 18th century, and more recently during the Franco's dictatorship between 1939 and 1975. Are there formal institutions in which the Aragonese language can be learned for the journey? Yeah. I mean, we have some schools, official, public schools teaching Aragonese language, especially in the north of the community, in the places where the Aragonese language is still spoken. And we also have some other legal measures in education. Yeah, I will focus on this right now. Here we have education. Other reforms by the local governments. Yeah, we'll explain this now. Considering Aragonese is now only spoken among minority groups in Spain, do speakers of the language experience discrimination? Yeah, we have felt this kind of discrimination for the last decades. I would say that nowadays this kind of discrimination is decreasing. Situation is getting better. There are more consciousness. There are more resources. But during a long time, during centuries, Aragonese speakers have suffered of discriminations. Totally true. What is the most distinct characteristic? Well, later on, about the characteristics of the Aragonese and how to distinguish it from Spanish and other languages. Previously, I showed a clip of an native speaker, and later on, I will show another one. Maybe the difference is that we have the sh when listening. We have the she sound, like shadow in English. No, we have that, and in Spanish we don't have it. We have ese or other sounds depending on the case. Yeah, or che, but she, bucho, baixada, that sounds that exists in Portuguese too, or in Catalan, or in French, or in English, and doesn't sound in Spanish. That can help us to make a difference between Aragonese language and Spanish. Let's see. Is Valencian a distinct Roman language? Well, Valencian, actually, I would call it, well, it's a variety of Catalan that is spoken mainly in central and south of Valencian communities. So there are two different names for basically the same language. That's the philological adscription of Valencia. I would like to ask if the Catalan independence movement deliberated in their language and regionalists. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there is a romantic idea coming from the 19th centuries in which languages are related to nations and nations are related to languages, and the safe movement that promoted Spanish in Spain in detriment of the rest of the languages can be applied for other nationalist movements, Catalan, and so on. But I would say that no matter your ideology, even if you defend nationalism and regionalism, a conscious and a sensible person realizes that nowadays we are living in the 21st century and that linguistic diversity and multilingualism must be the correct state. It's very difficult to find any person that speaks only one language. Yeah? So trying to impose only one language and to manage only one language in a global society, that would be a major mistake. That's against logical thinking. Okay, let's go on with institutional. What's happening today with the Aragonese language? Let's go on with the last part of this talk. Okay, let's go on. What's happening today? Yeah, so we have since 2009 more and more institutional support and public support, and what is as important, even more than that, social acknowledgement of the Aragonese language. So, in 2009, finally, after many years, a decree for the protection of the languages of Aragon was approved by the regional government. Then it was changed, that was very political and polemical, in 2013. But even with the change, even with this change that was negative, we have a legal document to work and to preserve and to fight for some rights and to ask for rights on the languages of Aragon. So nowadays, as an Aragonese speaker, I have some rights that I didn't have before. We also have had since the 90s, what I have referred to many times in this talk, the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, a European document approved by the European Commission and then approved by the Spanish Congress, in which it is stated that languages must be preserved and supported, and they specifically focus on any language, and they make some reports. I think the reports are made by every 5 years. No, so these reports are useful to know the situation of the Aragonese language and also to promote some measures and also to force the local authorities to adopt some measures and some measures for the promotion and support of the Aragonese language. We also have some other acts and legal decrees, not based on the languages, not focusing on the languages, but admitting them and registering them like the Acts of Roads of Aragon, the Act of Heritage of Aragon, or the teaching curricula. This is very important because the approval of the teaching curricula in Aragonis supposed one moment. Sorry. The approving of the teaching curricula in Aragon supposed that Aragonese language could be taught in primary schools and later on in secondary schools. So we need, we can say, yeah, we want to teach Spanish, we want to teach Aragonese, we want to teach Mandarin Chinese, we want to teach whatever we want at the schools, but we need to regulate it. So even if we want to teach it, and even if the teaching was admitted in the law, it was not regulated. We don't have curricula, yeah? In other words, we didn't have syllabus. Okay, we want to teach Aragonese language. We have the right, yeah, but we don't have syllabus. We need to develop the official syllabus. We finally got them. And as a result, several dozens of public schools and high schools of the north of Aragon with several hundred of students are learning and speaking Aragonese nowadays. Very important. In 2015, the Aragonese government approved a Secretary of Linguistic Policy. A Secretary of Linguistic Policy, which in the Filipino terms would be something similar to a vice department. So inside the Department of Education, inside the Department of Education, we have a vice department of linguistic policy for the Aragonese language with its own budget and its own measures, and at the same time with a public power, a public support to emit different notes, press notes, or media. And obviously, it is more powerful to emit some communications for the media if you are a public institution, a governmental institution, entity, than if you are a private association. In the municipality, some municipalities decided to adopt and to create some offices for the support of the Aragonese language. One in Huesca in 2016, but it was unluckily dismantled in 2020, and another one in Zaragoza in 2017 that it is not active anymore, but it is still present. Behind the reasons of the dismissal of these institutions, we have political reasons and change of governments, unluckily, but still we have some kind of support and some kind of reference, if not for now, for the future. And some people asked me about the university. Yeah, the University of Zaragoza, after many years and decades of hesitation, they have enhanced some very, very powerful and good measures, like the creation of a diploma or master in Aragonese philology, starting in 2011, and a specialization in the BA in teaching in 2020, yes, last year, and also some of the measures, courses, seminars, so on, talks like this one, but in the university, that creates and helps for the linguistic acknowledgement. Then we have education, media, and ICT. So things are getting worse and are getting better in the last decade, not only because of the public support, the administrations, the university, the education, but also because of the community itself. They are developing very interesting tools in order to handle and to use the language more and more, both for the new speakers and for the natives. So, as I said, we have an increasing number of students and schools offering Aragonese language, especially in the north of the region, but not only. And at the same time, we have some private associations like Noguera, teaching Aragonese language too, and creating quite a substantial community of speakers. They have developed people, especially a group of people of Aragonese speakers called soft Aragonese, which are also programmers, computer programmers. They have developed some very interesting skills and tools in Aragonese, like an official Aragonese version of Firefox, Skype, Telegram, these kind of applications we already know. Okay, you have the version in Aragonese if you want to get it. And we also have the Wikipedia version in Aragonese, the Wikipedia, which is quite useful, especially for local entries talking about the Aragon, the territory. They are very, very, very accurate, sometimes even more than in the Spanish version. Social networks. We have a lot of people, or well, a lot of, I mean, in terms of the language, of the size of the language, yeah. But we have a lot of people using Aragonese language in Twitter and Facebook, and sometimes in Instagram too. So we have private groups, public groups, particular accounts using Aragonese more and more, especially in Twitter. So even in the ICTs, the language is alive. And we have also online videos. We can go to YouTube or to different accounts and different infrastructures. We can go to social media, to different groups. We can search on Twitter, different accounts, and we can see a lot of videos and clips of people speaking Aragonese. So it is not hidden anymore. Before, when we didn't have these technological tools, people thought, well, this doesn't exist. I haven't heard it. They cannot say that anymore because they can go to YouTube and they can watch clips or videos made by Aragonese language in all the varieties by many kind of people, elderly people, young people, and so on. We have translators also, Traduce, OpenTrad, so you can go to the internet, go to the web page of the translator, and translate texts normally from Spanish into Aragonese, but also from other languages. And we have a very popular dictionary, a very good dictionary, open and free, Aragonario. So these tools work mainly from the Spanish perspective, so you need to know Spanish. But anyway, if you don't know, you know English, you can translate it from English into Spanish and then into Aragonese. And they are very powerful and good tools. We also have not only traditional music and traditional literature, as I said before, we also have new trends. And we had two very popular groups in the last decade, Mayacan and Proud. They disappeared, but still nowadays local groups are recording several songs or a few songs in Aragonese language. So the local groups doing modern music, pop music, rock music, not only folk music, they are just also recording and preparing songs in Aragonese. And in this sense, the initiative of Abertilo, an LP with these songs made by local groups, is very popular. I think they are now in the 5th edition, in the 5th LP. And they are going up and up, and at the same time they give an opportunity to local groups to be listened by an audience they couldn't reach before. We have blogs. I mean, at the time we have more than 30 living blogs of people written in Aragonese language. Many of them are stopped because people prefer now to speak. The same writers prefer to use the social networks, prefer to use Facebook, prefer to use Twitter. But two of them are still alive, as far as I know. Estricaya, which is the oldest blog in Aragonese language. And I would say, sorry, but it's my blog, so please visit it. And we also have Tierra de Barrenas, which is the oldest with no interruption, because Estricaya was interactive for my years, during some years when I was writing my first PhD. And we also have the first public TV program, Charrin Charran, in 2019, which I think is the most powerful tool, both for the native speakers and for the community speakers, in order to help to support their language, to use it, to listen to it, and to get some linguistic recognition, to abandon the shame of using the language. And it's also very useful for the rest of the Aragonese population to get some knowledge and to get recognition, acknowledgement of the Aragonese language. So this has been very, very, very powerful tool to have a TV program every Sunday morning for half an hour. Obviously, more would be better, but it's very good to see that people all over Aragon can see, can listen, can watch Aragonese people speaking every Sunday morning. Here, one extract of this TV program with two little kids speaking.
Hola, Charrin Charran. Hoy os vamos a contar una adivinanza y un dicho. Talaín saita el molín de Maitín. Bata al monte y no come, bata al río y no bebe. Tinga la engaminga y su manchina. ¿Qué? La astilla. Muy bien. Adiós, Charrin Charran. Aragon.
Well, here with the two little kids. And this is the end of the talk. I'm afraid that I've been very fast sometimes talking about the things. I might have misled something. I'm very sorry. I would like to have it more relaxed, but I wanted to say so many things in so little time, because to talk about the history and the characteristics of a language in just 1 hour or two is impossible. So I wanted to say so many things in a few times. But I wish you have had some basic ideas about the Aragonese language, and more important, some basic ideas about multilingualism and larger language and the processes they experience, and the importance values behind them. I will see some questions here. Let's see. I will. One moment. Here I see in the chat we have some questions. One moment. Yeah. Okay. Is learning Aragonese more confusing to learning modern day Spanish? I would say the difficulty of both languages from a Filipino perspective is basically the same. So I wouldn't say it's more difficult, less difficult. From a Filipino perspective, speaking one of the Austronesian languages of the Philippines, Tagalog, Bisaya, Ilocano, whatever, I would say you will have the same difficulties about learning Aragonese and Spanish. Once you learn one of the languages, it will be easy for you to learn the other because they are Roman languages, so they are quite similar. As well as if you learn Spanish, it would be easier for you to later on learn Portuguese. Yep. So I would like to ask, is there a presence of inclusivity for in online spaces? Yeah. We have a lot of Facebook groups, or a few Facebook groups and Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts in which we use the Aragonese language, and even they are sometimes seen by non-speakers, and they are curious of realizing that there are people that are using Aragonese language in these online platforms. With the presence of Aragonese different outlets for today, do you think the language could become mainstream? Okay, I would say it's difficult to find. It's difficult to say that an endangered language can be a mainstream language, but sometimes it happens. In the case of the Aragonese language, there is a song by Manolo Garcia, Mai, talking about a mother, and the importance of the mother, that it has become very popular. In the local perspective. If we focus in the global perspective, sometimes we have hit in quite little languages or a small language in the global, in the cosmopolitan perspective. I remember Dragostea Dinte in Romanian, or Gangnam Style in Korean. I mean, Korean, Romanian, they are not really powerful languages or main languages as Spanish, English, Chinese, Arab. No, but these kids were and are still listening all over the world. Sometimes may happen. Buenas noches. You mentioned a while ago that your goal is to preserve Aragonese. How many Aragonese speakers or writers? Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned that there is a statistic. There is in 2011, the Spanish Institute for Statistics stated that around 24,000 people, a bit more, spoke Aragonese, and more than 40,000 people could handle it or were passive speakers. Okay. Any other questions around there?
Yes, Marco. So, Aragon is not only rich in, the language, culture, but also I remember one of the contributions of the Spanish, especially the Aragon group who came here, here in our country, in the Philippines, was when they brought the Birhen Pilar de Zaragoza. No, so I think that was the time of Gobernador General Fernando Valdez Tamon, if you still remember that. I read that in the old documents, and I think um, they were really a good they were good supporters of the Spanish colonial government. So even if they did not introduce the language here, a lot of the people from Zaragoza, in your place, supported the government, and they introduced the religious culture actually. So one of that was the Virgen Pilar de Zaragoza. Yes, Sir Dennis?
Of course, we have three major shrines of the Virgen del Pilar. Of course, in Santa Cruz, in Manila, in Cavite, sa Imus, and naturalmente in Zamboanga. No? So probably
Oo.
they were, of course, influenced by people from Aragon.
Oo. Marco, do you think the reason why the Aragon language was not that dominant language during the time of Fernando de Aragon and Isabel de Castilla? Do you think it was because of the influence of the family of Isabel?
Well, I would
Yes.
say, yeah, about this issue, this political issue. I would say it's not only because of the familia of Castile, Isabella, the first of Castilla, but also because of the influence of the proper Aragonese king, Fernando II, who was Trastamara. He belonged to the Trastamara dynasty. That was a Castilian dynasty. So he also spoke Spanish at that time. But on the contrary, most of the people there, even if they didn't, even if at that time we don't find so many Aragonese documents, most of the people, common people, they still spoke Spanish, Aragonese, sorry, because you cannot change a language in just 50 years. You need more time, generation after generation, to change a language from one to the other. Even in the Aragonese case, more than 500 years later, it's still preserved with few speakers in a weak position, but it's still Yep. Any other question?
Sir Dennis, do you still have a question?
Okay, how about the dances from the Aragon region? Okay, is it Jota or okay? I think
The
because
folklore.
dances were influenced by the Spanish dances.
Yeah. Actually, well, Jota is very popular in Aragon. It's the most popular folk music and folk dancing in Aragon. But it's, as far as I know, I mean, I'm not an expert on Jota, but as far as I know, it's quite recent. I think it comes from the 18th or 17th century. And before, we had some more ancestral and old, ancient musical manifestations like los paloteados. I mean, playing with sticks in a similar way to how is it in the Philippines with the sticks, tinikling, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had also, and they are still preserved in a few places. So it's not only about Jota, the Aragonese folk, but yeah, the most popular folk manifestation nowadays and during the last century in Aragon has been Jota. Although Jota is also popular in other areas, the south of Catalonia, parts of Valencia, Castilla, and even Extremadura and Navarra. Sure, actually, the Jota of Cavite. It comes from the Jota of Navarra, and the Jota Carayana, I think it's Aragonese, is from Aragon at the very the roots at the beginning, yeah, although they later on changed. But yeah, in short, the main manifestation, folk manifestation, musical folk manifestation of in Aragon is Jota. Ah, welcome.
So it's not only about language, right? Even in food, right? Aragon has a lot of productos, no, alimentos that they can offer to us. I remember one of the best quesos, no, in Spain comes from Aragon. So they have the Andres Galindo. Is it correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
Zaragoza and a lot more. So they have the best queso. It's like queso from other parts of Europe.
Yeah. I mean, especially in the mountains, but I would say many places in Aragon they have a very very good cheese. In the north, I remember Radiquero. But I mean, you can also find good cheese in Navarra, other places in the north of in Cantabria, Asturias, in País Vasco. I mean, in the north, in the mountains, you find good cheese, but also in the south. And in Aragon too, yeah, I remember Radiquero cheese, and also good wine.
Yeah, good one. Actually, they use the label is they use the Aragon language too. No, it's the same as the other regions, like
Yeah,
Asturias. They use, so they really promote their culture. They really promote the language. So the same as in your university, right? In the portal, they use
yeah,
the Aragon language. So, that's one thing also when you go to Spain. So
yeah,
not only the Spanish language, but also the richness of the different languages. They use this a lot, no, in order to inform the people that this culture is not only about Castilla y Leon, but also they have Castilla-La Mancha, Valenciana, Gallego, etc. That's
yeah.
one thing.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, the language is used many times in traditional products like cheese or wine. I remember now a wine called Clarima, which is a tear, and we also have some craft beers like using the Aragonese language. Yep. I
Do you
mean,
own the Corona and Estrella? The Cerveza Corona and
yeah.
Estrella?
I
It's
mean,
from Aragon?
no, it is not. It is not.
Ah,
From Aragonis, Ambar. Ambar is
okay.
the most powerful one, and we also have some craft beers too. But Estrella, I think, is from Catalonia, and Corona from Mexico.
Okay. How about Maon? Maon?
I'm not sure about Maho, but I think it's
Okay.
from Madrid, I would say, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean,
San
not
Miguel beer in the
San,
Philippines.
San Miguel is the best one, but the Filipino San Miguel, not the Spanish San Miguel.
Okay.
They are different. They have the same. Actually, they have the same logo. They seem to be very similar, but when you taste them, they are totally different.
Okay, muy
Yeah.
bien. Bueno, Marco, muchas gracias, miles gracias por compartirnos sobre este tipo de trabajo. And again, this is a very helpful talk or webinar to our students because our students will choose what will be the best place for them when they go to Spain. No, I always tell them, so in choosing the region, not you should not choose Madrid, no, you should choose other regions because you will learn a lot from them, not only the Spanish language, but also other languages. So it will help them a lot, no, to know about Aragon, no, Saragossa. Saragossa is the capital, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
And
I
you are
was
from
talking so.
Saragossa. You are
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Saragossa. I have
I
a friend
was
there also in Saragossa. She is from the Philippines and then her marido is from Saragossa.
nice. I was born there, although it's a long time since I don't live in Zaragoza. But yes, I was born in Zaragoza, in the capital. And just let me add that for all the students that are listening to us here, if you have any question about the program about Spain, if you want to travel to Spain, or if you want to be an assistant teacher, auxiliar, just let me say that I am totally open for you. You have any question, anything I can help you, please do not hesitate to contact me. Yeah, and that's one thing. And the other thing is to say, once you travel abroad, once you go to another region or to another country, just be always open to their culture, to their languages. As I was with Tagalog, I tried to learn Tagalog, and I think this is part of the experience, of the real experience of traveling, because it is different to travel than to making tourism. We are not making tourism; we are just going inside the community and having a total experience. So just be open, don't fear diversity, go for it, and that's how you will enjoy the time.
Yeah. And Aragon is the best place for them.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
good place. Huh?
I think you have a lot of auxiliares there, but majority are from they are Norte Americanos, no? So I
Uh,
hope Filipino students will choose Aragon, no?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm Aragonis, but I always recommend the coast because the weather is better, people are friendly. Aragon is not a bad place anyway. But yeah, I mean, anywhere in Spain, if you can handle it, if you are open, you will have a very nice time.
Is it cold there in Aragon?
It is very cold in the winter. Yeah, we had the Filomena storm in January, and we have a 1 meter of snow in the capital, which is not normal. This is not the common situation, but yeah, we sometimes have snow. We sometimes went up with -5 degrees, something like that. So in the winter, it might be very cold, and in the summer it might be very hot. But on the contrary, the city is very affordable. It's very nice because it's big enough, but it's also relaxing, and you have many things to do, so you don't get bored. And you have close to the city, you have the mountains, which are amazingly beautiful, and you can go skiing there or doing some trekking. So it's not a bad place. Probably the coast would be more. I mean, for a first contact with the country, the coast would be more friendly in many aspects. The cheap coast, I would say Valencia. Don't go to Barcelona because it is very, very expensive. But Aragon also offers some good offers a good experience too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Is
I
Huesca
remember
part of
again.
Aragon?
Yes, Sir
Yes,
Maturan.
is Huesca part of Aragon?
Yeah, Huesca is the second capital. It's not far from Zaragoza. It's about 70 kilometers, 45 minutes by car.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very nice. I lived in Huesca for 2 years. It's a very nice place to stay. But the problem of Huesca is that I recommend you to have a car because you want to move a lot around the province to enjoy the trekkings, the natural falls, waterfalls, pools, so on. And without a car, that's difficult.
There
Because I
is no
remember
public
visiting
transport
Torres
there.
Vedras.
It's difficult to take it, yeah. I mean, public transportation is not so broad to cover all the waterfalls and the forests. So it's better if you have a motorcycle or better a car, or well, you share it with some friends. So Huesca is a very nice place to live. It's very relaxing. You have everything you need there. People are very friendly, but on the contrary, I would say you go there, you would need a car to enjoy the whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I remember visiting Torres Ciudad in Huesca and the big dam
Yeah,
there. Okay, so
yeah.
I
Yeah, in
think
Torre Ciudad surroundings, all the area, they have very good trekkings. You have a nice lake there, a dam, where you can do a lot of activities. But again, you want to go there, you need to take a car.
okay.
Oh.
It is the birthplace, I think, of San Jose Escriva, okay, the
Ah,
Balaguer.
Yeah, exactly. The very, very important place for the Opus Dei and
Opus Dei.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, there we have some milestones on religiosity. We have the Panizo the Panillo temple, we have Torre Ciudad. It's interesting how different religions, spirituality has focused on these areas. Also, some crusades decided to stop there, many of them, before going to the Holy Land, because they thought that was a sacred and a holy place.
Of course, in the Philippines, there are some families, with the surname Zaragoza.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes, the
yeah,
Zaragoza and the architects, Okay, the
Yeah.
Zaragoza.
yeah. And Zaragoza, another Aragonese villages. I remember there is a very important avenue in Ortigas called Lanuza, because of
Lanuza.
yeah, Lanuza is an Aragonese village. We have Teruel also, an Aragonese city. I think the mayor of Los Baños is now
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Teruel, or I think the family name is Teruel. So
Teruel.
yeah, we can find the Aragonese place names there in the anthroponyms, in the family names of the Filipino people.
Yes,
Same
my
as the
friend.
name of the street. We have the Aragon Street near
Yeah,
UST. Have you seen that? It's
yeah.
I think
it's
most of
near
the streets
SM San Lazaro.
yeah, are
It's
named after places in Spain.
exact. It's not as popular as Asturias, but it's still there. Yeah.
Aragon. Bueno,
Galicia,
muchas
is closest
gracias,
to Spain.
Marco. And
Yeah.
we are very happy that you always give time for us, especially when it comes to, different topics about Spain. And the students, not only the students, the Filipinos are really were really enlightened by your topic, by your talk. And I hope you do it again, no, in the succeeding webinars. So,
Sure, asigurado, siyempre asigurado.
uy, may
Laging kasiyahan na dito ako sa UST.
yeah.
Maraming salamat sa Mama Abigail, sa Sir Dennis, maraming salamat sa lahat.
Oy, napakagaling mag-Filipina ni Sir Marco.
I hope you
Konti
were
lang.
overwhelmed by a lot of questions.
Yeah, sure. Let's see the questions.
Okay. Meron pa ba? Okay, anyway. Sige. So, before we end the session, let us hear the UST hymn. Let us listen to it. Okay, the UST. Un momentito, voy a compartir la pantalla. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Magandang gabi. Buenas noches a todos. Thank you very much, Marco. Hasta luego. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Paalam.
Ciao. Bye.
Yes, very fruitful evening.
Bye. Thank you, Sir Dennis. Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.